express a high interest in sustainability. Oh, I'm sorry. High interest in sustainability. During your interviews, did it come out that was influenced by wildfires or weather change or anything like that? And if so, how long lasting would that response, do you think, be?
Well, you're talking about, first of all, we did measure climate change attitudes. And some of the items we used in the questionnaire came from the Six Americas study. I don't know if any of you have heard about that, but it's a national survey on attitudes toward climate change. And I'll just say that the respondents in our study are so much more concerned than the national average, shall we say. It's remarkable. And I didn't bring those data today. But you also have to talk not just about responses to questionnaire interviews, but about the behaviors that have gone on in this community. That's why I talked about voting for open space and voting to tax, ourselves for carbon action plans in the city. There's a lot of concern in the city around getting more of its energy from renewable sources. There are more PV systems there than elsewhere in other communities around the area and so forth. So it's not just interview statements, it's actual behavior. It was also interesting, though, that it was pricing, utility pricing, that drove charging behavior. Okay, so it's both of those things. Yes?
From your interviews and talking with these people, would it be helpful to specify these cars with an estimated MPH, miles of range per charging hour?
That could be an interesting data point. And there's some, people talked about the dashboard feedback being useful to them. And that might be a place where certain kinds of points like that could be made that people would observe it. So they're not having to go online to find that out. They're looking at the dashboard. So I think that could be useful. Yes?
I have two quick questions. Well, one quick one most likely. You said that people were happier the more that they were driving on electricity versus gasoline. The number for Boulder was, as far as average trip length, was also shorter than the national average. Did you find people were changing what they were driving in order to drive more on electricity? And did that change over the 9 weeks that they had the car? Like first they would be going 15 miles and like, well, but if I only go to this store right now and then come back and charge, I can do more on electricity, or not really?
So what they did, well, obviously they had to drive to work, or, is that they they talked a lot about this, making a game out of getting the most out of their battery. So they tried to coast as much as possible. And they even reported doing it in their other cars when they drove those, after they'd been driving this car. So they would take routes so they could go downhill as much as possible, or they would start braking way back from the stop sign, and so that they could be regenerating.
And the second question actually isn't for you. It's you. The study was sponsored by Toyota. We're at a Toyota event. I want to know if anyone from Toyota can speak to how this data is being used in either marketing the plug-in Prius or other plug-in vehicles, or how you're using this internally, because that's, to John's point earlier about a broader national use for this data from a specific place.
For that question, I'll turn it over to Ms. J.C. Chitwood.
No, that's a great question. As Barbara said, throughout the study, things took longer than we anticipated every step of the way. Installing the smart plugs, getting the data loggers in the vehicles, getting the households through the screening process. So the first part is we would have wanted this information a year and a half ago, but we didn't, and so we did have to launch our first generation plug-in hybrid without the benefit of some of this data. Some of it we knew already, which is to the question up here. People say they want 50 miles range, but they don't want to pay 50 miles range. Our previous market research showed that, yeah, people want about a 30 or 50 mile range, and they're willing to pay about maybe $1,500, $2,000 for it. So obviously, there's a disconnect between what people say they want and what people are willing to pay for it. So that's not hugely surprising. The reason we had about 150 vehicles overall in the United States, and this was just one of them, one of the research projects. But what we're really trying to find out from this research project is these greater questions about if you give people, the tools, the information, and the price incentive, will they manage their energy, and will they manage their charging energy, and how do they feel about being managed, and how does that then impact how they feel about purchasing the vehicle. So these are things that will be able to help us, going forward. And so we'll have to think about not just the sales process and the sales price and the vehicle itself, but what kind of rate are these people on? Are they SCE or DWP, and are they going to have managed charging or not managed charging? Because that's going to impact how people feel about the car, even though it has nothing to do with the car really, or the range, or the price, or the size of the battery. But it definitely impacts the consumer experience. So those are the types of things that we found uniquely in this study versus a lot of our other market research.
Was there any look at what the people drove before they got their Prius plugins, and if people who were Prius owners or drove green cars ended up doing better, or were more knowledgeable or more educated with the experience?
We absolutely have all the data on the vehicle fleets of these households. We have a lot of data that hasn't even been analyzed yet, so I'm afraid, although we have the data, I can't answer the question yet. Sorry. Good question.
When's data going to be available?
Well, we continue to analyze data, so. Other questions? All right. Oh, one last question.
I thought I would give you some backup. As part of another program, I was given a plug-in Prius for 2 weeks. And my personal results were pretty consistent with what you reported. I did change my driving behavior because I knew it wasn't costing me as much, so I went more. I traveled 423 miles, I think, and it cost me $27 in gasoline and about $3 or $4 in electricity. And I averaged out somewhere very close to your average, around 67 to 70 miles per gallon. So it was, personal experience was consistent with your results.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.